There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean Breeze Books. Welcome back to my channel and another Friday Reads. Oh boy, have I had a great reading week. And also a great week, personally speaking, other than my mom and Kenji and I, mom being the driver, got into a car accident on Monday. But it was very minimal. Nobody was hurt. We got rear-ended by no comments about my choice of verb there, people. On an icy city street. And the car behind us, they just couldn't stop. So we didn't do anything wrong. But when on impact, I felt something in my back. I got lots of back trouble, but this was higher in my back. But it hasn't developed into anything, and it's gone. And Mom and Kenji are fine. And no damage to Mom's new Lincoln SUV. So that was all good. But I just have to say, the poor man, he's young compared to me. He might be Kenji's age, 40. He was so sweet and gentle and apologetic and traumatized. The front of his car was in bad shape. And it wouldn't start. But he said, this is my second car accident. This was on Monday. And he said, I had another car accident, the exact same situation on Friday. And he said, and I don't have any money to pay for a tow truck. And then he said, I'm just on my way to a doctor's appointment that I took the day off work for, and I might have a serious chronic disease. So I just felt so bad for him. And he was just shaking, and poor guy. We were okay, but I'll never forget him. The day got a lot happier after that, because Kenji and I had our little Christmas together. I don't know if I've mentioned that Kenji's going home to Japan for New Year's, so he leaves this Sunday, and he'll be gone for 3 weeks. So I'm sad that he won't be here for what would have been his first Christmas as a Canadian resident. He did come home with me years ago for Christmas once. But it's the only time he could go for that long and see people, and he really wants to go, and that's great. So we exchanged our presents on Monday afternoon. And I always have terrible luck with maybe what he chooses for me, but especially with what I choose for him. And so for years we just took each other shopping in Tokyo because, we didn't know what to get each other. Kenji doesn't have any hobbies or any interests, and I can't buy clothes for him because he's such a boring dresser. Did I say that out loud? He wears unicolor clothes. Anyway, but I thought, and what I came up with was a big hit. He loves my mom's dog, Charlie. I think you've met Charlie, some of you, because I hold him up sometimes when I'm taking care of him when he's over here. And he walks Charlie every day. And he just adores Charlie. I think he loves Charlie more than he loves me, truth be told. And so I got him a photo blanket with a picture of Charlie. It's a picture he took, and he's got it as his screensaver on his phone. He loves that picture, and it's a wonderful picture. I'll show you, first of all, the blanket draped over me, which is, of course, what Kenji wanted to do as soon as he said, sit down, put it on, I want to take a picture. So here it is. And I can't believe how great the photo turned out on such a large blanket. So he loved it. And the other thing that I got him was a dream catcher from the Indigenous art gift shop that we have here called Wondrously. And I had to explain to him what it was, but I think most of you watching know what a dream catcher is for. And without getting into any detail, because it's rather personal, Kenji suffers from nightmares every night. Wakes up screaming. It's a terrible problem. Even for symbolic reasons, I got him that, and he was quite touched by that too. And then it turns out that first Mom took him shopping for my gift, and she took me shopping for his gift. So the photo blanket was a mail order. It came online. It's the same company that does my bookmarks, which I have for sale, by the way. Here's what they look like. Please buy some. So she'd taken him to the same Wondrously Indigenous gift shop, and he got me a journal book and an Indigenous bookmark and a wallet with a lovely Indigenous design. So just a delightful exchange of gifts. First time that's really happened, where we were all, I think, all delighted with our prezzies. So that was great. All right. I've got one video up this week, just on Wednesday night, and that was a lovely conversation I had back in the summer with the queer British-American novelist. She's American but has lived in the UK for years, decades. Hawley. And I just wanted to touch base with her, and I'm going to be featuring more of these next year. More wide-ranging chats with some of my previous guests, mystery guests, or whoever, just to talk about their reading and what they're working on now, and hopefully talking about a whole bunch of books, because I think that's what most viewers are interested in, not a discussion about one book, and I'm still going to be doing those, damn it. I don't care if you don't watch. But also more wide-ranging chats. And so this was the kind of conversation that Hawley and I had, and it's lovely, so I hope you'll check it out. Hawley is the author of one of my favorite novels of whatever year I read it in, called Other People Manage. And I have a full interview with her about that novel, which I'll link in the show notes, and I recommend that. It's about a lesbian relationship and grief, and it's incredibly powerful. Not a milliliter of sentimentality in it, and just so powerful. She also wrote after that her most recent novel. I also have an interview with her about that, and that's called A Decent World, and I enjoyed that, but it didn't pack the punch for me that Other People Managed did. So I'll link that interview in the show notes as well. All right, I have finished 2 books, and they were both stunning. They just knocked me off my feet, both of them. The first one, editing Sean here, well, I actually didn't ever mention the title of this novel, so let's put it in here as an insert, and I'll put the cover gif up, because I don't really even hold the book up for several minutes. It's called Getting It Right by Elizabeth Jane Howard. The first one is one of the last works of fiction that Elizabeth Jane Howard wrote before she started the Cazalet Chronicles. And I looked up the pronunciation on an audiobook today, so it's Cazalet. I think she wrote maybe one more standalone novel after that, I'm not sure. But this is the last one before the Cazalet Chronicles. My dear friend Leah in Calgary and I are buddy reading the complete works of Elizabeth Jane Howard in publication order. We started with her second novel, but then we went back to the first one, and since then we've gone chronologically, so we've gotten all the way up to... This one was published in 1982, but I'm going to stop here as I look and admire not my manly chest, but this Elizabeth Jane Howard t-shirt that my friend Leah found somewhere in her travels and sent me as a gift. And I've been waiting to show you. I think it's over a year ago, but because of my mystery guest and I coordinate my costumes and I could never figure that out. Anytime I've talked about Elizabeth Jane Howard in the last year and a half, and I have talked about her quite a bit, I couldn't wear it, so that neurotic stuff is all gone, and I'm finally able to show it off. Elizabeth Jane Howard. And oh my God, what a banger of a novel. It was so satisfying, so rich. The writing is always gorgeous, and the character work is always incredibly nuanced, and lots of humor in this one. Melanie has recently read it. I think she was moved to read it because she found out I was reading it. She'd read others. She read another one, maybe Odd Girl Out, which was... Anyway. And yes, her books are becoming increasingly humorous. And at first I made me a little nervous because the first few, they're not humorous. They're just dire human relationships and cruelty. And I just love them. There's always a glimmer of hope, but no humor, or at least none that I caught. I sometimes miss humor completely when I'm reading fiction. That says I'm an odd duck, but certainly didn't miss it here. But this is about a young man, Gavin. He's shy, he's sensitive, he's a hairdresser. He doesn't think he's gay, but he's not sure that he has a sexuality, and it's set around 1980. He lives at home with his parents. His mother's extremely overbearing, and he is always uncomfortable in any new situation, like really uncomfortable. And over the course of the novel, we see him start to come into himself and become a little more adaptable to new situations and new relationships. And there's a bizarre cast of women that come into contact with him, and he's completely thrown off kilter by each of these women and what they want, and he doesn't know what he wants. And meanwhile, his gay best friend is trying to set him up with guys and get him to come to gay parties, but he ends up meeting a woman there. 2 women there, actually, and oh my God, it's madcap, layered with humanity and compassion for him, the character. You just can't help but feel compassion for him while you're laughing at him, not with him. and watching him grow and change in his own way. It's been made into a movie. I don't know if I want to watch it. I might. It had a poignant ending. And in one of the conversations near the end with one of the women where things didn't progress and he was kind of hoping they would, that we see that woman wasn't really going to be very good for him. That's the one where I was a couple of weeks ago. I said, why did they fall into bed together? That's just so wrong. The novel ultimately bore out my feeling, but anyway. But that woman in their parting, their last conversation, quoted a poem, Thomas Wyatt poem. They flee from me. And she recites the first verse and tells him to go read the second verse. And so he goes home and reads it, the last few lines of the second verse. And she, me caught in her arms, long and small, therewithal sweetly did me kiss, and softly said, dear heart, how like you this? And I'm so glad that I paid attention to the poem, because the very last line of the novel is a modern rephrasing of that. Dear heart, how like you this? And just so powerful. Oh my God, I just love this novel. You have to read it. It was breathtakingly compelling, entertaining, and quintessentially Elizabeth Jane Howard. The other one that I just finished minutes ago, as usual, is the Irish novel Falling Animals by Sheila Armstrong. And oh my God, was this fascinating. This was published in 2023, and she has a new one coming out next year, I just found out. This is part of my Homage to Mikiko reading project, and I thought it was stunning. It's not quite a Sean book, but I don't care. I was just so mesmerized by it. And I think I missed things, like I need to reread it. I got most of it, but it starts out, a body is found on the seaside. I think it's even on the beach, but he hasn't washed up on shore. The body, it's of a man. He's just sitting there. And then, who is this guy? There's no ID, and there's record of him walking around the village, but who is this guy? Nobody has a clue, because again, he wasn't a drowning victim. And then every chapter, for more than half of the book, introduces you to a new character, and you have no idea what's going on. How do these characters, some of them are like a cook on a big ship, a big, huge, big rig or whatever, and various of her co-workers on the ship, but lots of people in the town where the beach is, and you think, what? How is this all? Fairly soon you realize that ship, it ran aground and then was abandoned, and it's been there for 10 years or more, and they never could figure out whose responsibility it was to tow it away or whatever. So just sitting there, and it's slowly getting, the sand is taking it, it's pulling it into the sand. And all these people in various ways tie into that ship running aground, which wasn't a tragedy. We are led to believe there was no death, no injuries or anything, but still it was a thing. And a lot about the ways that ship workers, I don't know what the right term is, but how they're taken advantage of, and the kind of fly-by-night shipping operations, trying to evade coast guards and all this stuff. But it's told and revealed to you through characters that you feel by the end of each chapter that you know deeply. And then how it's all tied together. I think I missed some of the ways it all ties together, but most of them I got. And it's fascinating. It was very satisfying. Not quite a Sean book, but it, like I say, it didn't matter. It was just beautifully written and unforgettable, unique characters. And some of the people living in this Irish coastal town, they came from America. Maybe that was a bit unbelievable that so many characters would come from other parts of the world and live in this little town, but who cares? But it's lots about grief and migration and love and, to a certain degree, sexuality. Just wondrously swirled together. I thought it was quite something. I can't wait to talk about this with Mikiko. She read before this Armstrong's debut collection of short stories, How to Get a Fish, and I remember she said she didn't really get along with that, but she was quite taken with this. I was really taken with this too. It was a Sean mystery, because who is this guy? But the character work was incredible, and really, I think it's clear who the guy is by the end of the novel, but that wasn't what kept me reading. It was these kind of vignette, like, vignette is not the right word, just almost standalone short stories, building a web of narrative that was gorgeously melancholy. I recommend it very highly. All right, I'm going to segue into the book haul part of this video by telling you what I'm going to read next, because I'm almost finished the Lucy Maud Montgomery short stories. A couple more nights I'll be done, and so I'm going to read this novel to Mum next. Dora Dueck, a Canadian writer who lives in BC, and this is her most recent novel. Yes, her most recent novel with this fabulous cover called All That Belongs. She was my mystery guest. We had a wonderful chat. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And without telling you anything about what the book's about, I'm just going to read you the opening paragraph of chapter 1, because it's just, the prose is really uniquely intriguing. That year, I say, with the dead, a year in the school calendar sense, from fall to early summer, because Jim was a teacher and we always visualized time by his schedule. A year of changes colliding. We'd moved some months earlier. My retirement, taken early and ratcheted high with expectations of bliss, came next. And then I'd opened to the past, put my hand on the latch, as it were, and pushed. That small woman in black, fluttering about my head like an annunciating angel. I wanted to open, and I did, but it was nerve-wracking too, because of course my Uncle Must loomed first. So if you weren't reading along on the screen, the uncle's name is Must, Uncle Must. Well, that's just really quite intriguing. So now we're in full book haul mode. So if you're not interested in book hauls, then you can switch off now. But I hope you'll stay around. I'm going to do 4 more books. The first one is a Canadian novel, I think from last year. Yeah, 2024, called Hi, It's Me by Fawn Parker. I didn't hear too much about it, other than I think it was quite popular, and it's a daughter coming home to the farmhouse where presumably she grew up just before her mother died. And there's there's 4 other women there for that death watch, and the relationships between them are all a bit chaotic. Fawn Parker lives in Toronto and Frederick, and she divides her time. Opening 2 paragraphs. Meursault said it best. Aujourd'hui, maman est morte. Upstairs, I creep quietly into each bedroom to ensure that there is nobody unaccounted for in the house. I'm almost disappointed, then relieved not to find my mother up here. The rooms are tidy and bright, and dorm-like in their uniformity. Each has, more or less, a bed, a dresser, and some sort of desk or dressing table. Downstairs is a 5th room where Miriam stays, so she doesn't have to climb the stairs more than she needs to, due to pain in her legs. The rest are upstairs. Andrea, Sue, and Lynn. I promise the names will sort themselves out. I love that line, because I have trouble keeping track of characters. Facing out the front is my mother's former bedroom, where there are 2 boxes of loose items of hers, collected from various common spaces in the house. The rest of the room has been left as is, excluding the bed, which has been made. Someone, at some point this morning, had to have made the bed after my mother was removed from it. Each time I think of her, I have to make the conscious choice to think my mother, and not my mother's body. And here is a much-loved early collection of short stories by one of my favorite writers and one of my friends, Sharon Butala, Queen of the Headaches. I had a giveaway for this. Maybe it was on my Patreon. If you join my Patreon, I have lots of giveaways there. I try to have a few on here, too. And this was originally published, I think, in '85. But I've heard from people that have read it recently, and apparently it's just marvelous. Heidi of My Reading Life and I are buddy reading this in January, so I thought I'd better haul it first. And I certainly love the opening paragraph of the first story, which is called The Mission. And I know that the premise of this story, the reference to what her husband did with her art, is true, because she writes about it in her memoirs, too. My husband once threw all my paintings in the Halifax dump. He did it only once. I never painted again, and since I eventually divorced him anyway, he never would have had the opportunity to do it a second time. But I imagine him while I'm sleeping peacefully upstairs in the master bedroom beside my second or third husband, sneaking in and quietly slipping each of my paintings off their hooks in the living room and the dining room, even the one that hangs in the hall that I thought he would never notice. I see him moving slowly sideways out the patio door, holding them carefully in his black-gloved hands, loading them one by one into his Volkswagen and stealing away in the night. The corners of the pictures, they are all still lifes of fruit and flowers, stick out the window of the car and disappear into the darkness as he drives off to the dump with them. Perhaps this time it is Vancouver or Yellowknife, or the outskirts of a village in Spain. Sometimes I think I will never be safe from him. Just love that. And here is, I think, a fairly unanimously admired or loved novel that came out this year from an American writer, The Imagined Life by Andrew Porter. He teaches writing in San Antonio at the university there. And I know Greg have supposedly fun read it. I didn't listen to his review other than the first line where he said he really liked it. I hope I'm remembering correctly. I'll go back. I always do that. I go back and see what Greg said once I finish the book. And I'm going to be buddy reading this in January for my debut buddy read with Illia of Read and Reread, which I'm excited about. This is about a man whose wife and son have left him, maybe permanently, and it prompts him to find out what happened to his father, who walked out of his life and his family's life when he was 12 years old. Opening paragraph. When I first embarked on this project a few years ago, this search, if you will, for the truth of what happened to my father, my wife Allison warned me about the dangers of getting too close to something I might not want to know. She reminded me of what had happened when she'd gone through her own mother's journals shortly after her death. About half of the stuff in there, she said, she'd wanted to know, and about half the stuff in there she hadn't. In the end, she felt that her mother's image, or at least the image she'd always had of her mother, had been diminished, changed. She'd been humanized, is what I think she meant, and I suppose that sometimes, despite our best intentions, this isn't something we always want. And the last one is a Ukrainian-Canadian novel that I picked up at a thrift store. It's called Sons of the Soil by Illia Kiriak. And it's in really good condition for its age. Let's see. It was published in Winnipeg. The second printing is 1983, or maybe, 1983. So actually, it's actually newer than it looks. It seems like a book that could be from the 50s. Even the author photo looks like not 1983. And my eye is always drawn at thrift stores and used bookstores, or any place I'm looking at books, to the title and author I've never heard of, and so this is why I got it. The novel is about several families who came to Canada from Ukraine and made new homes on virgin land in Alberta. That's all I need to know about that. I believe the name here is pronounced Rahori. I'll do more research, but that's what I found. So here's the opening two paragraphs. Rahori Workin sat on the threshold of his hut, warming his old bones in the heat of the spring sun. He was clad in a white old-style belted shirt and white pants. His shoulders were covered with an overcoat. Dressed this way, sitting there in listless passivity, he showed no pleasure in the blessed warmth. On the contrary, his grey bushy brows, which drooped like a thatch over his deep-sunken eyes, his ashy bristling mustache, which overhung and covered his toothless mouth, his long unshaven face, these created the illusions of a skeleton which by some miracle had risen from the grave, dressed itself, and sat down on the threshold to enjoy the sun. In truth, it was not the real Rahori sitting there. If this spectre had been weighed and measured against the Rahori of a decade ago, the tragic contrast would have revealed how little remained of his former self, how the rest had wasted away and withered, all his vital energies dissipated like the juices of a dried apple. It's really that image at the end. All his vital energies dissipated like the juices of a dried apple that I just loved. So, I hope to get to this someday, obviously. That's my book haul. That's my Friday Reads. Thank you so much for watching. Editing Sean has just noticed that Christmas will be happening between now and next Friday. So, holiday greetings if you are into that sort of thing.